I've been thinking about perception a lot today because I saw this quote yesterday from George Berkeley. I believe it's Berkeley. I don't know if it's Berkeley or Barkley, where he said, to be is to be perceived. Kind of an expansion on like the whole I think therefore I am thing. He says like, no, to be is not to think, it's to be perceived. Because you can only know if something exists if it's being perceived. And I don't know, that quote just really got me thinking about perception, how like, I don't know, guys, I think perception's a solid contender for just like worst thing ever. Like just like absolute worst thing that has ever come out of anything. Obviously this is an especially influenced conversation, if you will, just based on the fact that I'm having this conversation in the year 2025. You know what I mean? Where social media is, I'd say, I think probably the way people are interacting more than in real life. I don't know. I think it's tough to gauge that because what do you call an interaction? I know most of my friends have over 8 hours of screen time a day though, so something's going on. I can say that much. This is also a topic I was debating even coming here to talk about though, because like, I feel like there's such an irony that I can't miss in me coming here to talk and complain about perception while also curating an environment to be perceived in a very specific way. You know what I mean? Like, as much as this is the most authentic I've ever been on camera in this series, I still am curating everything. I color grade it in a certain way. You know, I make sure I wear the same thing generally in each recording just to, you know, keep it consistent. As minute as down to like the cameras are at a certain angle. You know what I mean? Like, I obviously set up that camera to get a good angle of me. I'm not going to do it to get a bad angle of me. I'm not that honest of a person, you know what I mean? Where I'm going to make myself ugly on video just for the sake of what? Principle, you know? But, I don't know, I think there's an irony to it, and it made it feel like I couldn't really have a conversation about it. But I think also, sort of even removing it from social media, just talking about perception out and about in the real world in our own communities, I feel like it might even be, I think there's a case that perception just as a concept is the antithesis, if I'm pronouncing that right, and two, if I'm using it correctly. I don't own a dictionary. No, I'm joking, but I believe I'm using it right. It's kind of, perception's almost the opposite of authenticity. And obviously, you know, how do you define concepts being opposite from one another? That's a tall order, but I mean it like this, like, have you guys ever heard that question of like, what would you be doing if no one was watching? How would you act if no one was watching? I'm sure you've all heard of this. It's a very common question you'll see asked. And I think that question is more insightful than I think I've ever realized, because what you would be doing when nobody's watching all the time is the most authentic version of yourself, right? But you can't be doing it all the time, and I think it's actually impossible to do it, because even when you're alone, you take the outside world into your room with you. You know what I mean? Like, you understand social norms, and just by even doing that, you know, the words you think within your head, down to everything else, come at not a level of inauthenticity, but like, they are in a way sort of compromised. Like 100% authenticity is not possible as long as you have been perceived at one point or another by the world around you. I think we can all relate to this being at its most extreme. I mean, at least I know I can. You know, if you guys were ever in middle school and you tried to be one of the cool kids for like a week, I think we all had that experience where it was like, you were acting a little different, you know, you were kind of putting on a different version of yourself that's inauthentic. And you know, that's one thing when you're 13 and putting that on because it's like, oh, I feel like I need to be cool right now. But I think there's an argument that never really goes away. You know, I think there's an argument that we're still all wearing 1% of everybody else's clothes around us, just because it's like, you gotta do that in a way to fit in. You know, you gotta talk a certain way. You gotta act a certain way. to fit in the world around you. And through doing that, I mean, authenticity becomes almost impossible, you know? How do you be authentic when you have to fit into a world? Like, maybe the authentic version of me is out there, like, running around in the woods scavenging or something, you know what I mean? I know that's the most, like, bro science take ever, but sometimes I think about that, like, what is the... And then, I think the reason I think about this so much, too, is because, like, authenticity is a very important thing to me, if you guys can't tell by the amount I talk about it on this show. And I think that sometimes I wonder, like, I know I can't be authentic all the way, so why be authentic at all? Like, it'd be so much easier to live life if I just threw on a quarter zip right now and headed over to Morgan Stanley and tried to get a job. You know what I mean? Like, and just pretended that that was like me, like that worked for me. That would be a much easier life than the one, maybe not like easier in all regards, but I'd be making more money and all that, you know? So why don't I do that? I think maybe the answer is, once again, just kind of how much can you bear of taking the world around you, I guess, right? Because the reason I don't do that, even though I'd be making a lot more money if I did in the long term, is that, like, first off, I'm terrible at golf. But second off, like, that's not an easier life, because I'd be living a lie every day. So is it just trying to get the version of you that feels like the truth, even though it's not possible to 100% reach that truth? I don't know, like, and then it's like, is there a point? I think one of the questions I always find myself coming back to in this series that I think I need to just, like, actually do a full paint and talk on someday is there a point in doing something to 75%? You know? Not everything to 75%. I think, like, in order to be a full, rounded person, you need to do some things to 100%, but is there a case to do 75% authenticity and compromise the other 25% for the sake of money or something? I mean, in a way, that's what I'm doing here, right? When going back to that question of what would you be doing if nobody was watching, my answer would be painting. I just wouldn't turn on the cameras beforehand. I'd probably even still be talking. I'd just call a friend instead, right? And, you know, as long as they answer the phone, I can't even imagine that it'd be all that different. So, in me turning on the cameras and editing this after, is that me almost throwing in my 25% of negotiation with the world around me to become something that I'm slightly not, in exchange to permit myself to be something that I am? And then even with this, I mean, I think the idea of perception on social media is an interesting one, but I also think it's kind of, I don't know. I don't think I've developed a take on it that's good, because I kind of don't view it as real, but I also do know it's real because I feel it. Like, in the last week, actually, 2 Paint and Talks I've recorded, I was like, man, should I not talk about this topic? Because I was like, I don't think the audience is gonna like this. Like, specifically the AI video, my takes on modern art, I was like, I feel like they're gonna not like these takes. I feel like they're gonna disagree. And that's actually part of the reason why I did upload those videos, because I was like, no, that's good then. Like, I was like, I would rather, my biggest fear is becoming like one of those people that's audience controlled. But then I'm faced with another paradox, because if my biggest fear is becoming audience controlled, the best way to do that is to not have an audience. So I want to garner an audience on my terms. Isn't that just selfish? You know, how do you do that? And then let's move away from this whole idea of, like, just for a second, let's move away from this idea of, like, there is no way to be 100% yourself, right? Because I think it's kind of an endless, I don't think I'm going to get an answer that satisfies me there, right? I think I want to talk more about, like, the way that you see the world will, in one way or another, define your habits. Even if it's as simple as, like, I'm a student, I need to study. You know what I mean? And your habits obviously define the world, or not define the world, define yourself. They end up in one way or another, at one point or another, defining your identity. So how in a way, I think you could argue that like perception is what actually creates your identity, whether you like it or not, no matter how authentic you are. I feel like the advice that people always come to when talking about this, not that I'm trying to even give advice here, I'm more doing this for myself, obviously. If you guys can't tell, I'm the one with the crisis going on here. I'm the one that needs the advice. But, you know, I think the thing that this conversation always ends on is usually like, just ignore what others think and be yourself. But it's not that simple, right? It's never that simple. If it was that simple, everyone would just do it. You know, like, it's so much harder than that. And every concession you make, whether it's 1% or a million, feels like the world. So what do? You know? You can tell yourself all day that the perception of others don't matter. They will, someday, in some way. There is not one person out there that doesn't care what others think 100%, right? And, you know, perception of others doesn't matter. Just like, go live in the woods. Like, go ahead. You know what I mean? Like, that's not... I feel like it's the whole concept of ego death. I feel like this reminds me of ego death. Like, the act of going on podcasts when these guys are like, my ego died a long time ago, that's inherently egotistical to brag about going through ego death. Like, I don't know why nobody's caught on to this yet. Like, these guys telling you about ego death, you know, their ego is very much alive and you're watching it. I think, like, that's where it's like, it's so... I think it's like there's so much dishonesty because people want to be perceived that they don't care about perception because they think being perceived as that they don't care will free them in an extent. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's where I'll discover. Maybe this will be the first and last time I ever talk about perception affecting me in any way, because I learned that it's easier if you act like you don't care, if nothing ever affects you, then people won't affect you. Not because of their actions, but because of your own mindset. Maybe that's what I'm going to learn here today. I think like it's more so about curating, right? Like in the same way that I do these videos and I set them up in a way where I feel comfortable to express myself because I'm in control of some things about the perception, right? Like I'm never going to be in control of what you guys think about what I'm saying. That's just impossible. I also wouldn't want to be. Like I would just release this video to ChatGPT if I wanted to be in control of what they would think. I'd go, tell me you like this video and just send it over, you know? But I'm in control of the perception of things like what I wear, what angles the cameras are at, what I'm going to go in talking about. I also have Final Cut. If I were to record this, which I've done many times, I have 10 paintings maybe that I did and I was like, I didn't like that recording, I'm not going to do it. That's me controlling perception in one way or another, right? So with that being said, maybe it's about curating your environment in terms of like, who do you keep around? Do you keep around people who are going to make that perception hard to go through? They're going to make it hard to express yourself? Or you keep around people who are going to make it, who are also interested in growing and not really worried about what others think? Maybe that's just the big part of it, you know? The other thing though is that could just turn into an echo chamber real fast, you know? Like there's an element of that perception in middle school that's like also important to go through, I think. I don't know who I'd be if I was still sitting at if I never at 13 was like, oh, I'm gonna try and be cool, and learned really fast that like that wasn't cool. I'm not made for the basketball team. You know, if I didn't learn that, maybe I wouldn't have gone as hard on doing art and all these things I enjoy now so much, you know, like all these things are so important to go through. And it's why perception is such a double-edged sword, because it's like, it is sort of everything, especially nowadays. It defines your identity, or will end up defining your identity, I guess, especially if you're not careful, you know what I mean? Like it could really, we've all met people like that, right? You guys can, I'm sure you guys can relate to that. Like we've all met a guy and we go like, okay, you are still trying to be cool or whatever. If you ever have come into contact with a 40-year-old who has a really thick gold chain on, who's trying to tell you about how they were like the men on the basketball team in high school. We all know that stereotype, right? I think that's an example. That's almost like the quintessential example of like perception got to this guy in the worst way possible. No hate to anybody like that watching this. I love the chain. It's just like you're being perceived. You know what I mean? So I guess maybe it's just about curating an environment that accepts perception so you can get to at least a level of authenticity that you can live with. So much of that, I think, so much of this series is me concluding that you just need to get to a point of like, what can you live with? Because it's so hard to get to 100% of anything. Yeah, this is the painting. I was going in and just doing some colors, but I felt like it looked cooler if it was like some 3 spires with some smoke in front of it. And I gotta say, I love how this looked, or I love how this turned out. I went in with no plan, and this is pretty neat. This is not bad. It's outside my comfort zone. It's definitely not like I don't really have a style, but it's not my style in terms of like, this doesn't feel like me. So I'm not gonna say I love it, but it's interesting. I think it's fun. It was fun. It was fun to do too. So go check this out over on the Instagram. Sorry, today's Paint and Talk was definitely not as strong as I perhaps wanted it to be, but I don't know. I think I lost the topic a little bit, so sorry about that. Hopefully you perceive this in a good way. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint Talk episode 130. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.